Okay, so I'll do the roll call here. Member Braille?
I am here. Yes, hi.
Hi. Member Burden? Oh, I was going to go last with him. I said that. My goodness. But look at him. He's scrambling back.
Right.
Like he heard his name. Member Burden, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool.
Who's this
All right.
talking?
It's Philip.
It's taking roll call.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm
Carrasco?
here.
Okay. Member Carrasco?
Here.
Member Cho?
Here.
Vice Chair Klein?
Here.
Chair Nyack?
Here?
Member Rectal?
Not here, but coming.
Member Shen?
Here.
And Member Templeton?
Here.
All right. Chair, you have quorum.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, we're going to open it up to the oral communications. And it looks like we have one member of the public who'd like to speak. So you will have 2 minutes to do so. And I don't know who's my timer today. Someone from the Office of Transportation.
Joanna will be the timer and Elizabeth will be the calling person.
Awesome. Okay.
Thank you.
So we have one raised hand currently. The first speaker is Rebecca Eisenberg, followed by Adrian Grant. Rebecca, it's your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I greatly appreciate all the time and effort that you've put into this very important project. I live near Churchill in Old Palo Alto, and I have 2 high school age kids, one who will be entering Pally next year. So I have a strong interest in this, as well as obviously a political one. I'm talking to urge the committee and ideally the City Council to reconsider opening the idea to build the tunnel underneath the ground. A lot has changed in the past year since this was taken up by the City Council, and where the City Council last May 2019 voted 4-1 to reject the idea of a tunnel. And looking at the other ideas, the elevated tracks, closing Churchill Street, all of them offer a lot of disadvantages to the community, everything from safety hazards and community issues by isolating one community to another, making it difficult for kids to get to, especially kids with disabilities who need buses to get to Pally, to creating pollution and noise to the residents. Each and every one of the non-tunnel options leaves a lot to be desired. I feel that the reports that were done last year did not sufficiently investigate the financial advantages of the tunnel, especially the opportunity to reclaim approximately 50 acres of usable land owned primarily by the city, possibly with a Caltrain easement that could be taken underground. This wasn't really explored or researched as far as I could tell, and using that land for housing. I think that would be a huge advantage to an underground tunnel, in addition to the advantages to the community, such as avoiding having train tracks dividing us in half. Thank you for your consideration. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next speaker is Susan Newman. Susan, it's your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself and begin speaking.
Hi there, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
I just joined, so I missed earlier comments. I wanted to speak to something that some of you may already know about and that has been being discussed in our neck of the woods in Southgate. A group of us in Southgate are conducting a second survey of the neighborhood residents to gather input on all the current options. As you may remember, we previously surveyed as many neighbors as possible on Churchill closure at the time when the viaduct was the only other option. Then, in advance of the community meeting planned for this past March, we went door to door and emailed widely to share descriptions of the 3 options then under consideration, including the partial underpass, and encouraged people to attend the meeting to make their voices heard. Obviously, that meeting didn't happen. In order to make sure that all the voices from our neighborhood are heard, we are now conducting a second survey using SurveyMonkey. We sent the survey to prior survey participants, as well as leafleted every house in the neighborhood with instructions for signing up for the survey. Residents have to provide their names and street addresses to ensure that we are hearing from all residents and only residents. Each participant then receives an even-handed and objective description of the 3 options under consideration, followed by the survey link. I'll send a copy of this overview email to the XCAP, but you can also see it on Nextdoor Southgate where it's posted. The goal is to offer the chance to participate to every resident. Falling short of complete participation, we hope to achieve proportionate representation of all parts of the neighborhood. We'll be sharing those results from SurveyMonkey with every Southgate resident for whom we have an email address, as well as with XCAP and City Council. So stay tuned. I just wanted to put that out there to answer some questions that have been raised about possible bias in administering the survey, et cetera, et cetera. Everything is completely out there, so you can take a look. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Our next speaker is Peter Pellen, and I will go ahead and it's your turn to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, Council. It's Peter Coughlin. I live on Mariposa Avenue, right next to the Church's Crossing. And I just wanted to advocate for trying a prototype of the closure. Why don't we just put up a temporary barrier and then see how all the traffic flows are impacted by that experiment? It's a temporary closure, so we could, if we discovered that that was not the right way to go, we could easily open it back up again. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Currently, we have no other speakers wishing to speak at this time.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so with that, we will move to item number 3, which is a discussion and action on the review layouts for underpass options and fact sheets from Meadow, Charleston, Churchill, and the Matrix. So we've got 4 different sets of handouts. We have layouts, renderings, fact sheets, and the Matrix. This is the summaries of evaluations with City Council adopted criteria matrix, different from the dynamic matrix that you might have seen last week if you were following along. And I will open it up to AECOM's folks. I guess will you do a presentation for us, Peter or Elliot or Millette? Oh, Millette, I think you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Great. I had to quickly switch to phone audio because it wasn't working so well on my. So I may ask if you guys do want to look at the individual documents to ask Peter to call those up. But I was just going to do what I did before, where maybe we'll go through just highlighting the changes that we made to the sheets, which were pretty minor at this point. For the renderings and the layouts, we basically added them to show the eastbound Meadow Drive left turn on Alma Street, and then also the U-turn at Alma Village Circle in the Alma intersection. So that was the main update that we did. And then we also added notes indicating other items of the geometry that you may not see in the renderings. Maybe we'll start with that and see if there were any questions on those 2 items.
Okay, ex-cappers will do this kind of popcorn style. If you have something that you want to ask, just go ahead and raise your hand. I think that'll be the easiest because hopefully they're minor at this point, but we'll open it up. Greg, I see your hand, and then I see Dave Shen.
Yeah, my only comment on the renderings, they're beautiful, and I have a question about that in a sec, but I'm having to work real hard to figure out which one is which. And I'm sure if I stared at them long enough and compared them to the maps, I'd be able to figure it out. But if you're going to distribute these more widely, you're obviously going to have to label them, which I'm sure you have that information internally. Also, are these renderings, are they better than the renderings we had for the viaduct and the hybrid and the trench? They seem like they're a bit higher quality, and I just worry, and I don't want to incur another $100,000 bill here, but I worry a little, and I worry a little bit that people might get biased one way or the other if we have a very realistic looking high quality rendering on one hand and a more primitive rendering on the other. And maybe if I'm the only person who had that reaction, then fine.
Yeah, so regarding the labels, when these are uploaded, we'll have them all labeled. So sorry, we probably should have named them or something for you to help you with that review.
I mean, at this point, I ought to be able to recognize each one, but there are a few I have to think pretty hard about. So.
Well, you do have to do a little brain exercise to figure out where you are sometimes. So. Yeah, that will definitely, when they're going out to the general public on our virtual meeting, those will all be labeled. Your comment about resolution, I mean, they're all based on the same model. So unless Peter has other information, I mean, they should be similar resolution. There shouldn't be any, we haven't done anything differently for these that we've done.
Right.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of is the renderings of the viaduct may have been taken from screenshots of the animation. If that's the case, there might be lower resolution. I'd have to go back and look to see. I'm not really sure.
If I can find a particular one, I'll poke around the site. I'll bring it up. It looks like the resolution is the same, but it's like, you know, the quality settings on the render engine were turned up a little higher or something. I'll just go back, and if I have seen anything obvious, if not, then my memory's off and forget it. So thanks.
Sure. Also, they add one little thing. When we do upload these to the virtual room, you'll be able to click on certain areas of the map to see the renderings from particular views. So it'll be self-evident when you click where you're taking the image from.
Yeah, that'll be real nice.
Yeah, I suppose we could add labeling too, if that's really needed.
All right. Well, if you have that link, then people will figure it out. But clearly, you've got to, you've got to know. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, Dave Shen, and then followed by Phil Burton.
Yep. Thanks. I actually had that same comment about the rendering, like which one was which for a couple of them. So yeah, putting a label would be great. Thanks for doing these layouts. They look really good. On the partial underpass one, it's super hard to see the right-of-way line that's east of the tracks, because I think the purple of the change in the road is laying on top of the magenta line. Is there some way, and I don't know what, to make that line either sit above it or maybe some other indication? I'm not sure exactly how, but you have to go all the way to the right or left of the image to go, oh, that's where it starts, and you assume it kind of goes all the way connecting across with no break.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's
referring to the layout. Go ahead, Peter.
Partial underpass.
Layout.
Churchill partial underpass.
Yeah, he's talking about the layout. The line disappears underneath the shading for the road. I think that's what you're saying. Is that
That's
correct,
right.
Dave?
Yeah, that's the most severe one. On some other ones, it also disappears, but you can kind of see where it starts and ends. But this one's like way at the edges of the image itself. It almost seems like there's no right of way on the east side.
Yeah, if it's critical to see that line underneath, there's things we could do to get it to pop out.
Well, if it's a potential showstopper, if Caltrain doesn't give us the right of way, then it would seem pretty important to put that in, or at least indicate it better. Along with that, I was wondering about other property impacts. They aren't clearly noted. You might be able to infer some of them, but they're not. It's not immediately obvious where there would be property impacts on these images. And I know we're laying a lot on top of these images, but just wanted to call that out as well.
Yeah, the intent was, well, first we do show this on the fact sheets now. That was a comment from a few weeks ago. So that's included in the fact sheets now. And also, like you just said, that if we start to try to show right-of-way acquisitions and impacts on this map, then it gets very cluttered and difficult to read. That's why we left it off of this one. If needed, and I think we've done this in the past, where we create a separate exhibit showing just the property acquisitions, either partial or full.
Hope you guys consider it. I could see both pros and cons to that. If someone sees their house sitting in a area, that might increase stress for that family sitting there. But at the Caltrain right away, I think could be really useful as well. I was also wondering if we were going to have additional profiles for the bike ped options that are sitting in these. I know on one of the Meadow Charleston, you showed a cross section, but you didn't actually show the other direction. So wondering, how much, what's the maximum grade on those, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, we showed, we again added that to the fact sheet, some text. If I'm not mistaken, the profile for the ped bike path is shown on the Meadow Charleston. I'd have to go back and see what we sent in the package this week. I thought that was included though.
Oh, would it match the, well, I guess it wouldn't match the road. It'll be
no,
different than the road.
Yeah,
right?
it would not match the road. No, that's correct. It's on a separate profile.
Yeah, I remember seeing the cross section, but I was having trouble trying to print these out this morning. And so I don't remember exactly what was in there. But for the Churchill one, like the Kellogg one, I don't think there was anything for that.
Yeah, that's right. We did not include that. That's, again, mentioned in the fact sheets. Those ped bike ramps at Kellogg and on the other side near the school are based on 8% grades with the 5-foot landings. So if we were to flatten out those grades, say to 5%, that would increase the length of the ramps.
And just for comparison, do you happen to know the California Ave grade by any chance?
I believe that's 8%.
That's an 8%. Okay.
I believe so. Yeah.
All right. Cool. That's it for me. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Peter, while you're talking, it looks like Elliot did flag. We do have a ped bike profile in there, whether it was in the package or not. We do have that, and it would be part of the exhibit boards that would be on where we show. I don't know if you remember at the community meetings where we have, kind of have the graphical version of the railroad profile on the fact sheet, but then we had more detailed ones that were very long. We'll have similar for the bike.
Yeah,
at least
I just,
it looks like.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Well. Yeah, I'm just doing a quick screen share here. Yeah, so you could see this in magenta. This is the ped bike profile at Meadow. And you can see it's different than the road profile just above it. That should be in the package that was sent.
Yeah, actually, just to pop in, we were discussing this just before we got on the call, which was that there was a lot of trouble printing these. And so Philip mentioned that there might be a way to tweak these so they print better, because my printer had to think about them for half a day before I spit them out. So
So they are much larger than the renderings we received previously. I just went back to the Connecting Palo Alto website and I clicked on all the renderings that are there. And in most cases, it'll be one big page with either 4 or 6 smaller renderings on it. Whereas here we have an attachment where we have full-size renderings. And I really appreciate these full-size renderings. They let me really, so I think you took the same image and shrunk them down into multiple pages.
Oh,
so
I see. Gotcha.
So,
yeah.
so I just request that when we show this to the public, just like in the store, the brighter TV sells, even if it's not any different than the one next to it. Just please, treat them all the same. That's all.
Yeah,
but I think that
absolutely.
And these might be extremely large, which I'm really enjoying the really large detailed images, but that could be why they're making people's printers spark.
That's right. I believe for the town hall meetings, when we only had so much room in the room itself, we threw a bunch of renderings on one board.
I mean, it'd be great to see somewhere online these full-size renderings for everything. I'm sure you have the files.
Yes,
just have to put them in the right place.
Yep, that's our intent.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Phil, you're next.
Okay, so first, I just want to put my 2 cents in for the idea of labeling all the drawings and renderings very carefully, because even if we can figure them out, I think the general public would have a hard time. Second, it's a general comment. I had to really look hard at some of the rendering, the layouts rather, because I couldn't see any legend for the yellow lines. And I assume those are traffic stripes, but that should be called out, again, for the benefit of the general public. Third, as just a point of tech geekery, let me just say this. I suggest when you create PDF output, you do at least 300 dots per inch, if not 600. Yes, that may increase file sizes, but get much better image quality, especially if you want to zoom in on a small section. So very specifically, could you share page 3 of the layouts? Because I have a question there. It may be my ignorance, but if you could bring that up, I'd appreciate that.
Which one was that? I don't have the package in front of me. Sorry. Is that the Charleston?
I believe that was Meadow.
Oh, Meadow. Okay.
It's the Meadow Drive plan.
Yeah, because again, maybe I'm misreading the drawing, but I didn't see the left turn lane from eastbound Meadow to northbound Alma indicated. We had some discussion on that and how a traffic pocket lane was not necessary for that.
That's right. So let's zoom in here. It's yeah, there's no left turn pockets, but that left turn can be made from the through lane here. So it's hidden underneath the structure, but that left turn is allowed.
Yeah, well, you know, the issue here is communications, because people might say, my goodness, look at all the turn lanes were not being allowed. But since we have found a way to accomplish that, we ought to indicate that.
Yeah, it's shown on the renderings. You can see it here on the striping that the left is allowed. I believe we add it to the fact sheets as well.
All right.
I don't know. I suppose we could potentially make these shapes transparent, although I think that could create confusion, because then you're seeing striping on 2 different levels. It gets a little awkward.
Yeah, I realize that. And maybe it needs to be a little call out on the side or something. You know, I'll leave that to your people, but I just think that, you know, turnouts are a real issue for this design. So we want to be as complete as we can. Second, if we can go back to that same page. Again, maybe I'm being nitpicky, but I'm going to try to put myself in the shoes of Joe Public here. It looks as though we can make, I'm not sure why I'm not seeing this now, but the turnouts into Alma Plaza, can you slide the drawing over a little bit to its left side? Yes, thank you. It looks, again, from the drawing, that we can make a right turn into Alma Plaza only from that transition lane, that pocket or slip lane, not from the main roadway on Alma Street, the through lanes.
That's right. There'll have to be a little bit of weave here you have to get over. And then these people to go through would have to slide over like that.
Sure. No, I understand that. But is there any way to show that, even if you have like a really dotted or faint line, that might be helpful.
You mean show the weaving movement? I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, yeah, if you can indicate that, maybe you just use another arrow. I mean, again, we're not trying to do the actual lane striping, just to sort of tell people that, yes, from the right through lane, you can, in fact, turn into Alma Plaza.
I don't want to make these too confusing. I mean, is this not self-evident? I mean, you could even, like, from this lane kind of merge in over here like that. I mean,
yeah, all right. Okay,
multiple ways to do it.
So I'll leave that to you to decide if this is a valid observation or not.
Yeah, all the exhibits, now I understand where you're coming from, but all the exhibits really are meant to show the proposed striping layout. And if we start adding arrows, I think that could get confusing. I don't know how everyone else feels about that.
Well, you know, one way to look at it is when we do the community feedback, however we do it, we'll get some feedback and we'll find out if we should have done that or it was confusing if we had done that.
Mm-hmm.
So just a general question, in several places, the design costs were 12% grades on the underpasses.
Mm-hmm.
Is that allowable for a WB40 vehicle? That's just my curiosity question.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay, that's good. Okay, so Yeah, I guess that covers my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Do we have questions about the fact sheets here too, or just about
I think
the
we're going to go to
renderings?
those. I think we're just taking the first two first, and then we'll go to the
Okay.
second one.
Okay, thanks.
So I did have a few things. So echoing what everyone has said, certainly labels, but I want to be more specific about the labels. So certainly labeling the intersection so that I know I'm looking at a Churchill drawing. But if it's possible to even put the names of the streets on the street itself, that would be helpful because sometimes they orient differently. And I would also see if we could fit a north, south, east, west thing, because there's some people who think more directionally, and that might help as well. So basically as much labeling as we can put in there that makes it clear, this is Alma, this is a bike path, this is Meadow, whatever, that would be super helpful. I was also going to suggest, maybe you're already doing this, for exhibits for the town hall. I think the traffic report has sort of a turn map that shows how all the turns are possible at those intersections. And you may need something similar at a future town hall meeting to sort of explain all these movements, and that might help solve the problem that Phil is basically trying to indicate. So without having to futz with the lane striping map, you might have another one that shows that. And I will say that in the fact sheets that we can talk about in a minute, but there are some images which are easier to see, like the right-of-way lines that are magenta and stuff are easier to see because the aerial the terrain view is more grayed out, so the lines really pop, and that makes it a little bit easier to see some of those things. So there's a couple of additional drawings in the fact sheets that I think are super useful, but are not in these plan views that we're seeing, which is fine. But I think you're going to need a combination of all of those to sort of tell this story. So the more maps, the better. And like the concept plan view maps that you have are really helpful. It's because you can see the structures more clearly. You can see the property impacts, that sort of stuff. So looks like that's all we have for, I don't see any other hands up for this one. So you want to take the next two? So I guess it's fact sheets and matrix.
Yeah, that's good. So looking at the fact sheets we'd been trading back and forth quite a while, the underpass alternatives, where we had on those adjusted the title of the property impacts to conceptual private property, and also added a footnote there. And we did update the color schemes on the property impact map so that it's not conflicting with the other plan view on there. And that included making the pet and bike ramps and sidewalk a lighter pink shade. And then the updates that we made on the matrix and the wording was carried over into these fact sheets. And then on Meadow, we also updated the concept plan view as well as the intersection turning diagram to incorporate the left turn. We also, in the package was all of the other fact sheets that had previously gone to the public, and for those, on all of those, we changed the first paragraph, which was usually like, what is a trench, to about the trench, like the other fact sheets. And then also updated all the matrix text to be consistent with the matrix sheets. And we did do a little adjusting on the cost estimate wording in a couple places. So that was that on the fact sheet. On the matrix, we basically updated the note on the bottom, the footnote that says it's comparative at this location. And then we added the potential for the sound barrier for the underpass option. And we also updated the order of magnitude cost under row E. And the on Churchill, we adjusted the color per XCAP comments on one of those lines. So basically just incorporated comments received. Also on some of it, we did make some minor changes on the previous worksheet, like connecting Palo Alto needed to be updated because it only had, 7 alternatives and we have 9 now and some things like that.
Okay, ex-cuppers want to raise your hands for feedback? I see Dave first. Go for it.
Okay, great work on all this. Thanks very much for all this and checking everything back and forth. I was curious about adding, and I don't know if we can do this, because in the matrix, we've added item Q, the Caltrain right-of-way impact, but it isn't reflected in the fact sheets in the list. So there's sort of this, well, we did this little tweak, but the old city council criteria didn't have that in there. And how should we unify those or not? So I was wondering about
that. We did tackle that one under the engineering challenges, and that's in the, the engineering challenges portion of the matrix. It's not, one of the council criteria. So
okay.
We didn't call out any of the engineering challenges specific in the fact sheet. We just did the city council adopted criteria. So those are usually found in words throughout the document about the pump station and all of that.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. All right. In who decides on the connecting Palo Alto one? Let me just pull this up real quick. At the last sentence says council is expected to choose the preferred alternatives, and I was just wondering if we should kind of change that to plan, because I'm guessing it's not going to happen by this fall. So, or editing that statement to be more accurate given the current situation. Let's see.
Yeah, well, maybe, I was still under the impression that it previously said spring of 2020, I think. So I had pushed it to fall of 2020. Is that, Bill or Ripon, is that not the case, that we're still pushing for some sort of decision?
Yeah, I was going to say, I believe that was the plan that we had. Is that, Nadia? Is that?
I think it depends how you're defining winter, fall and winter. So whatever month you draw the line at, then that might be the thing that changes that.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So you'll figure it out, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. However directed, we will change it.
Okay, cool. In the what happens if we do nothing section, you give the great unclearable cues presentation for Churchill, but you might want to just say that this is an example of what happens, and that maybe give some words that say that this is actually something that's going to happen across every single intersection, and not just at Churchill. So, or just saying like an example of this would be, this is Churchill, we did a study here, but it's going to happen in every intersection if we do nothing.
Good point. We can add that.
Yeah. Let's see on the next page. Alternatives being considered. So you've added the ones that we've added back in November of last year. So my question is, City Council really hasn't officially added these as options yet. Is that correct? And I'm not sure if they should sit here, or maybe there should be a distinction between
no,
the ones
they added those officially. When they gave the green light for us to include those, that's what they did. So they're official.
Oh, okay. All right. That's it for me. Thanks a lot. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Dave. Greg, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I hadn't really seen before the first two pages, and I'm happy that in particular on the second page of the fact sheet, you talk a little bit about the gate downtimes and that stuff. And we also talk about the number of collisions. And I think we might want to be extremely careful about the language there, because I've noticed that people tend to dismiss all grade crossing incidents in Palo Alto as suicides. Whereas in fact on Churchill since 2008, we've had 6 collisions between cars and trains. And fortunately, in none of those cases was anybody killed. And those are the only accidents we've had on Churchill. Whereas on Charleston, in the last 10 years, we have indeed had 10 accidents. 5 of them were collisions with vehicles, and 5 of them were unfortunately collisions with pedestrians that were ruled as suicides. And I wonder if we just want to be a little careful about the word collisions. At the very least, I think we should use the word accidents. And then I can put more details in what we're drafting for the final report. But I think it's important that I've had a lot of people tell me, well, we don't have to worry about rail safety because it's only, the people deliberately getting on the tracks. And about once a year in Palo Alto, that's not the case. So I don't know, maybe my actionable point then is perhaps instead of the word collisions, we should consider the word accidents.
I think the challenge is that this is actually pulled specifically out of the Caltrain business plan. So they're citing a sourced document. It's not something that was created by staff. So we potentially could add a footnote that describes what collisions is defining. That might be a way around that, but that would be basically changing what they, the source that they cited. And sort of amending it.
It's probably coming from the FRA, the Federal Railroad Association.
Oh no, that's where that's where the data comes from. That's like basically a row in their database.
Yeah.
But by saying collisions, you're implying to me that a train is hitting a car.
Be using.
Right. Yeah.
We could double check that.
Yeah, and it says the source. It says the source right under the table. It says source is the Caltrain business plan. Booklet May of 2019. So I think the problem is if you're going to pull it from the booklet, you can't change it and then pretend it's from the same booklet.
So that's why it's 5 instead of 6. Okay. I will. I'll just make sure we get the right information in our report. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. Anybody else have anything? Okay, I have I'll jump in then while you guys keep reading. So on the matrix, 2 questions. Let's see, on Meadow and Charleston evaluations of the engineering challenges. You have in there, under the viaduct option, you have no Caltrain right-of-way acquisition expected. However, options of lineal park or dual use under the viaduct would require Caltrain approval. I guess, is that because you're considering that a right-of-way impact? Is that what that is supposed to be about? Because
I'm sorry, catch me up on that one again. I was just pulling up the.
Sorry, it's okay. As I just read it out loud, I just realized what it is. So let's skip that one. Let's move to the Churchill evaluation criteria page that has closure with mitigations. The first column, letter G. I noticed that under partial underpass, you have a line that talks about the 6-foot noise parapet that could reduce noise, and it's not listed under the closure with mitigations, even though it is on the fact sheets. So I think just that we need a line in there under that box on the matrix.
Oh, it is, okay. So there's inconsistency between the fact sheet and
exactly, yeah. So basically anything that's at grade could always have this noise parapet, and you have it on the fact sheets, and then you have it under the partial underpass for Churchill, but not for the closure with mitigation. So I just want to be sure that it's reflected, it matches the fact sheets. And then on J of that same column, closure with mitigations, where it's just a minimized disruption in the duration of construction. I was wondering with the widening of the Alma Bridge at Embarcadero, is that encapsulated in that description of the construction and duration?
You mean for the length of time, or?
Yeah, so is it really only going to be something that's closed on nights and weekends to be able to widen the historic, well, the very 1936 old bridge at Embarcadero?
Yeah, those bridges could be widened by maintaining traffic. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I just want to be sure that box reflects that correctly.
Yeah, there could be complete replacement of that bridge, and then of course that would likely require temporary closures. But yeah, usually
a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Okay. And then under I of engineering challenges, again under the closure with mitigations, it talks about the relocation of the pump house at Embarcadero Road to which would be required to do that widening of the Alma Street Bridge. Do we know where that pump station would go?
It looks like there's room just to move it slightly to the east.
Okay.
So the widening would cut right through it. I believe it would just be kind of a shift to the east or closer to Emerson.
Okay. So, but it's not a relocation that needs to happen.
Well, it'll be relocated, but it'll just be
Right, but
nearby.
in general terms, we don't need a new piece of land. It'll just kind of nudge over. It's in
Right.
general vicinity.
Right. That was my initial take on it. Yep.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all I had. So thank you. Is there anybody else who has any comments on these before I take it to public comment? All right. I'll let the ex-cappers keep thinking, and then we'll move to public comment. If there's any member of the public who wants to comment on these items, this is items 3A through D. Now would be the time to please raise your hand and speak. So you can each have 2 minutes. And it looks like we have 2 speakers. So I'll let, well, now 3. Elizabeth, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you. Our first speaker is Eduardo Latch. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. Go ahead and unmute and start to speak.
Yeah, I guess we're getting to know each other. It's Eduardo Jack. It's Catalan from Barcelona. I just wanted to say thank you. I think that you have been able to incorporate comments from the public as well as comments among yourselves. I think the matrix, everything looks great. So I am really happy with the work, and really I just wanted to say thank you. I feel like this has been a very transparent and very good process in terms of being able to get information in and out. As you have heard from me before, I am pro Churchill closing and mitigation efforts, given that it is the best for the citywide, less expensive, less disruptions, and it really helps everybody, including safety for kids. I was happy to hear the quote about the 6 accidents on Churchill. I happened to see one of them myself, and thankfully no one got hurt. So thank you again, great job. And it looks really good. And I look forward to the continuation of this and the presentation of this to the City Council and the citizens. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Drew. Drew, I'm going to unmute you so you can go ahead and speak.
Yes, good afternoon. This is a reference to in the beginning. Okay, let me try again. This is the supposed to be the beginning of this item. One of the ex-cap members was talking about the Meadow undercrossing and going north to that Alma Village. And so there was the left turn lane under the undercrossing and how to mark it. And just listening to that, I just throw out the idea of putting just to the east of the bridge, the brown bridge there, just through left small arrow, just pavement arrow. Those kind of line arrows are in other places on that drawing, and just put a small one. I know technically it wouldn't be painted that far east on the pavement, but you can cheat on this drawing. And then on the merge going north on Alma, when you come up from the undercrossing and then you turn into the village there, there's the white line is solid at the gore point. If just maybe that white line is dashed for about half that length before it becomes solid again for the right turn lane, that could help with that merge discussion that was happening. Just 2 hopefully simple possible graphic helps there. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Terry. It's your turn to speak, Terry.
Thank you so much. So again, thanks a lot for doing all this. It's kind of mind-boggling, the amount of detail you guys have to go through. First of all, I'd like to echo some of the points originally said earlier, in that we really do need to make sure it's clear that some of these options really have some issues as far as property seizures and right-of-way access from Caltrans. And I think that we need to keep in mind that the closure of Churchill, which is I'm for, I don't think that's a big shock. You guys just heard from my husband, and we live in the same place. And but basically, it's the cheapest option. And of course, it's going to be, with the mitigations, the most efficient for us to do. I love the idea of closing it off and seeing what happens. I think someone mentioned that earlier on. I think that's brilliant. It's just not very risky, and we can check this out. And I look forward to you guys' recommendation and moving this forward. But I do think it's imperative that we keep this idea that there's a Caltrans issue, there's property seizure issues, which I think if people knew about, they would be against. It's not something that everybody knows about in the neighborhood, that those issues exist under some of these options. And let's save the money. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks again for your work.
Thank you, Terry. Oh, we have a few more raised hands in just the last couple of seconds. Just one moment. Our next speaker is Adrian Grant. Adrian, it's your moment to speak. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick comment on the terminology of accident and crashes and collisions and so forth. There is a movement away from using the term accident just because a lot, especially these Caltrain collisions that occur and other incidents where vehicles get stuck on the tracks are almost always the result of one or more vehicle code violations and willful violations of, you know, things like queuing across the tracks when you're not supposed to because of impatience, et cetera. So, but, you know, I don't have a particular, you know, huge axe to grind about what terms to use, but that's just some informational comment there. As far as the concern over property impact, I just wanted to make a comment on the viaduct and just point out that the viaduct has, apart from the visual, has no property impact, no takings. And if a lower U-shaped viaduct were to be used, or the bridge over Churchill, it would lower the whole structure by up to 5 to 7 feet, which would reduce the need for the grade exception and reduce the length of the approaches and greatly reduce the impact on the 23 homes that run along, I guess it's Mariposa Avenue. There's 23 properties between the park and Churchill. And with the lower viaduct, it would only be at maximum height, again, lower with the U-shaped bridge for a few of the homes along Mariposa. And by the time it reached the park, it would largely have no effect. And so that height is very comparable to the height of a house itself or any of the landscape or your shrubbery. So very minimal impact. I think it's the best alternative of the remaining. It's not the cheapest, but the best. And clearly the closure is going to be the cheapest. So, you know, there you have it. But that's my view of it. And I don't see any differences beyond that. So thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Adrian. We have Rob as our next speaker, followed by Roland. It is your turn to speak, Rob. You may start.
Yeah, this is Rob Levitsky. I live on Embarcadero, and a lot of us who live on Embarcadero don't believe this mitigation stuff that Gary Black of Hexagon has come up with. There are typically 9,500 cars a day that cross the tracks. And if you close Churchill, those cars are going to go north to Embarcadero or south to Oregon. And since Embarcadero is 3 blocks away and Oregon is 9 blocks away, it's Gary Black's opinion that the cars will take the cheapest or the quickest route. So we'd get approximately 7,000 of those 9,500 cars. And you dump them all on Embarcadero at the worst time of day after you've added another signal to slow things down even more. Now, Nadia was asking last week about what is the effect of 120 or what's the level C to level D? Well, we're talking about 7,000 cars a day dumped on top of already a busy set of thoroughfare. And so it's not fair to dump all this on Embarcadero. It's not a mitigation that's going to work. And though it's convenient for some people who live on Churchill to say, well, we'll have a nice little cul-de-sac for us and our kids can play. But it's not fair to dump the traffic from Churchill over to Embarcadero. It's just not fair, it's not right, and it won't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. We have one more speaker, and that's Yoriko Kishimoto.
Thanks, and that'll be our last speaker.
Thank you. Go ahead, Yoriko, you may start.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, XCAP. I was just reviewing the descriptions, and I have to say that the verbiage and the wording really favors the closure of Churchill, and you know, really works against people who live on or near Embarcadero. So if you could take a look at that, I'd appreciate it. You know, things like calling the intersection expansion on Embarcadero, calling it an intersection improvement. Although our comp plan does call for no intersection expansion, if at all possible, because of pedestrian bicycle safety issues. And it talks about Churchill being narrow, but I mean, I would say Embarcadero right away is about the same as Churchill. It's only that so many cars have been crammed on it. And so there's a number of places like that. If someone could actually, someone who lives on or near Embarcadero could help review the language and make sure that it's more even-handed, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Nadia, I believe we have one more.
Yes, thank you. We did, somehow we missed Roland, so go ahead. Roland can be our last speaker.
Go ahead, Roland.
Thank you, and this is going to be a very brief. It's clarify the point that Adrian made. And I know you're not going to like this, but I believe the official term Caltrain is using from whenever a train hits either an object or a person is known as trespasser incident. And that basically is it. It doesn't mean, you know, whether it was a suicide, whether a car was on the track, so some pedestrian or bike of accident, you get the term that they use. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are our speakers.
Great, thank you so much. And I did want to acknowledge that Keith Rechtel was able to join us for the record, so that should be noted. Keith, we went through items 3A, B, C, and D, and I wasn't sure if you had any specifics that you wanted to call out in terms of corrections or suggestions or.
I mean, there's some things that I don't quite agree with, but I don't think it's worth dickering on. Overall, they're reasonable.
Okay. Greg, your hand is still up for some reason virtually. Is that from before or?
No, I'll take it down.
Okay, great. Okay, so I don't see any other. Oh, Phil, you got your hand up. Go ahead. Gotta unmute yourself, Phil.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I just want to comment without talking about the general merits that a temporary closure of Churchill to measure traffic volumes would not be useful because traffic.
Phil, can you move your mic closer to your mouth? I'm sorry, we can't hear you too good.
Oh, sorry. Right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. So I just want to comment without prejudice either way that a temporary closure of Churchill to observe the traffic diversions would not be meaningful because traffic volumes overall are way, way, way down. So we probably have a level of service A or B, even in rush hours in most parts of Palo Alto. Thank you.
Thanks. And I did want to say on Yoriko Kishimoto, who had asked for changes in the language, if you have any specifics that you would like to send in, we of course would take anything in writing. It's more helpful to have like specifically what words you're thinking are weighted in a particular way with any suggestions and send those to the XCAP and to the team, then we can send those along if they can make those changes. Larry, I see your hand up.
Well, I have to remind everybody, particularly members of the public, that this is the report of the consultant, and that we don't really have any right to wordsmith down to that level. It's their report. If that's what they think is appropriate, that's what's there is we are writing a report where we may agree or disagree with what the consultant says. And so when people want to make a suggestion, it's really a suggestion to the consultant as to how their language might be improved. But it's their report.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, some of the public comments and letters were about language in the safety draft that we attached to this. So that's when someone was talking about improvements, they were talking about the safety draft that Pat Lau wrote that we put on our site. So yeah, there you go.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. Okay, and so Phil and Greg, if you could put your hands down virtually, that would be great, just so I don't get confused. Okay, awesome. Okay, I think with that, we are ready to move on to item number 4. So thanks, that means we're saying goodbye to AECOM. So thanks to Millette and Peter and Elliot and everybody for joining us. So ex-cappers, this section 4, just for Brown Act reasons, we basically had to release the drafts of chapters 1, 2, and 6 so that we can restart the clock on everybody sending in comments. Full disclosure, as you guys know, I've been super busy. So Larry and I have not had a chance to discuss how we're going to work on integrating these things. But if anybody has any suggestions, we can discuss those. We're not going to take time at this meeting to discuss each draft because we would be here for hours and I would never do that to you. But if there's any kind of general suggestions or general comments about how this is going or how it's working within your group, or do we need to discuss some things, now would be a good time to ask questions. Tony, I see your hand first.
So my question is, Larry kind of alluded to this staff matrix versus ours, or staff findings versus ours. And I'm wondering how these two things, these two staff and ours, merge together. And specifically, I think Phil and Keith and I were assigned or volunteered to do the findings report, and we have not finished. We haven't even started on it, I don't think, because we're still finding. In our opinion, we're still looking for solutions and guidelines that will shape some of the choices that we make. So I'm wondering when that should happen and how does it become public, and is it part of the matrix? Because a lot of the findings are in the matrix that Corey did and that staff have done.
You mean Carrie?
Carrie, yes. Sorry, Carrie. And so do we embed them in the matrix that Carrie has done?
So I think the difference is, as Larry said, the matrix that's called the summaries of evaluations with City Council adopted criteria is basically taking the City Council criteria and then adding the engineering section that they've added, right? And so Carrie's is sort of a direct reflection of that. But I think throughout our process, we've identified either additional questions or additional concerns or additional things that we want to know more about. And so what I sort of imagined, and it's this is just my imagination, if others have thoughts, please chime in, is that the section that you guys are working on is basically calling out like, okay, well, the matrix, the general matrix that the AECOM has worked on says this, but we have these other things to consider and here they are. And so it's it can be, hey, we're missing information about these certain things that might change the answer. It could be, hey, we think a combination of things might work. So as an example, you might say, well, regardless of whether or not you choose the partial underpass, we still think some of the mitigations that were suggested for the closure might be something that we think about. And so, but this should reflect what we end up discussing as a group, not what you guys think your opinion should be in your small group, right? And so it can be written probably contemporaneously as we kind of go through these things. And so it doesn't mean that you need to update the AECOM matrix. Carrie's, remember, is our dynamic matrix. It's what we'll use as a tool as we work through this. So if you want to put those in there because it'll help with our discussions, that could be super helpful. And even if you put things in that ultimately as a group we don't agree with or we don't use, that's okay. At least it's kind of a discussion point. That's how I'm sort of envisioning it. If others have other thoughts or disagree, I'm totally open to hearing more about it.
Okay, thanks.
Let me, if I can jump in,
Yeah.
that's
how I'm thinking about it as well. And just to plug conversations about it for when we do start our deliberations. Right now, I have 2 people that have reached out to me. One is Tony. I believe you wanted a second bite at the apple, which is fine. And the other is Dave. I believe that I can talk to one more person for iterating on that matrix before we bring it back. So please reach out and let me know if you want to.
Great. And I think we were reserving Keith because you didn't have a chance the last go round. If you specifically had stuff that you wanted to discuss with Carrie, you might be the better one to go first because we haven't really heard from you. And that might really
yeah, I could take a look at that and talk to Carrie about that.
Especially because you guys are dealing with some
I can talk to 3 people, right, Nadia?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so just to let everyone know to reach out.
I thought since the matrix was public, we could all talk.
Well, we can discuss it in a public meeting, but if we want to have a smaller subset of the group before it comes back, then we have to limit it for Brown Act reasons. So the 3 of you can talk with Carrie, and then when we come back at our next meeting and make all of that public again, the timer sort of restarts and the counter restarts, and then another group of us can, smaller group. So part of it is how many people can work offline, and then how many of it have to work in public. And again, Larry and I are going to talk about it, but I suspect that the matrix will be something that we kind of have open as we have these discussions, because it'll help us capture what the discussion is about, which I frankly see as helping the rest of us actually write out in words what it is that we're thinking about, so that we don't miss technical details. That's what I'm hoping it does anyway.
Thank you.
So Greg, I see your hand next, and then Dave.
So I did want to talk a little bit about the safety section, because I don't know if you had a chance to read Pat's report, but some of the public did. And it goes into quite a bit of detail on each of the crossings and specific recommendations, some of which are Pat's opinion, some are not. It doesn't seem to me that we need to include all of that in the XCAP report. And what the XCAP report probably needs is a much shorter section, which says, for all alternatives, let's include, some of the information about lethal means restriction and so on, and then some specific recommendations for the whole, for all of the options. So I guess what I'm asking is, other than write a draft and send it to Nadia and Larry, how do you proceed, and how much, of the gory safety details do we want to include in the main report, or should we let what Pat wrote stand alone as an appendix and sort of summarize? And I guess I'm looking for the opinion of the group, or if not, I will send a draft into Nadia and Larry, and then we can talk about it.
Yeah, I think so. Greg, you didn't really, even though that was yours and Pat's kind of group work, you actually never got a chance to chime in on it. So it might be easiest if you kind of take your next cursory pass at it and send that to us, and then we'll make that public at the next go round. And then we can kind of all discuss it as it comes up. So what I realize is going to have to happen, and I'm not sure that I thought about this very well during our counting of days in terms of deliberations and when our report is due, is that we have entire days blocked off for deliberations. But part of what we also have to be doing is taking some subset of the meeting to discuss the sausage making of the report. And that may be a certain standard block of time that we have to have, in the coming weeks. So that'll be sort of our scheduling challenge as we go forward.
Okay.
Larry, go ahead.
I think Greg is on a right track. I've taken a quick look at what Pat submitted, and I think and this is helpful to all of us who are going to be writing various chapters. I think it all has to be in terms of a third person. It has to be, Pat wrote her section in the first person, lots of references to her experience, use of I feel this and I feel that. But this is a report from all of us. And if a person ultimately feels that his or her views haven't been accurately represented, or doesn't disagree with something, disagrees with something, then, as Greg has suggested, that person can have an appendix to the report saying whatever the person wants to say. But so I think that in general, what we're going to be looking for, I think, is a shorter chapter on safety rather than going into a lot of detail, and one that is written in the sense of for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the high level outline I was thinking of was to discuss safety considerations for all alternatives based on the information that Pat has gathered, and then, you know, restricting lethal means, and then maybe if there are specific things, like if the answer is a trench, we must do this, and if the answer is a viaduct, we must do that. And that was about as far as I was going to go. So I keep saying I'm going to have time to work on it. I really, you know, don't have any excuse now. So let me send you something soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, I see Dave Shen and then Phil. Tony, was your hand up from before? Is that from before? Yeah, okay. So Dave, you're next.
Thanks. Just to follow on Larry and Greg, it seemed like to me when I read Pat's report that it was more her, when she had to leave the group, that she wanted to just basically brain dump and capture. It wasn't necessarily the section. It was more like just, I want to tell the group everything I had learned and known up to this point. So yeah, so that also leads to my section, which is section 2, I believe, in there. And I had some questions about, you know, like we described all the intersection alternatives, but we're wondering, like, is that enough? Should we go into more detail? Should we just say for anything else, just go look at the fact sheet? So, and I don't know what kind of forum that kind of discussion should happen in, given what you just said, Nadia. So, so that's one question, is did we capture enough information there? And is it too much, too little? Do you want to see more, whatever? And if we have to dive into each section one by one, fine. And then the other one was, it seems like at some point, this whole thing's got to be assembled together, because then we can see, like, for example, like, let's say Pat's section was what she submitted. Then I go, well, why is she describing Churchill mitigation to all the alternatives again? I'm like, wait, that's my section, you know? So, so at some point we're gonna have to go through the whole report and go, well, here's the repeats, because we had separate groups doing this work and they thought they would do it the best they could, but then all of a sudden we got repeating information and whatever, or inaccurate information, or maybe information needs to be updated, because as this process goes, some of the stuff that we wrote today actually won't be valid a month or two from now. So, so those are my thoughts. Sorry, I don't have any answers, but I'm just wondering, like, how is this all coming together with the Brown Act looming on top of all this? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like I said, Larry and I haven't had a chance to meet, and my time in the next just couple of weeks is going to be terrible. But it's possible that once we start to read all the sections together, we decide that we may need to reorg the outline. You know, maybe we just have a description of every single section fully, and then why we recommend what we recommend. And maybe that is where we kind of collapse everything. So for now, there might be a lot of repetitive things, but I'm sure with some good editing that will get eliminated, and we'll come up with a structure that kind of puts it all together. And just as a group, I think it would mean that we'd have to all agree upon a new outline, or you would have to bless Larry and I's editing skills to give us the freedom to create an outline based on whatever we've got. And we can cross that bridge when we get to it, but I don't think we're there quite yet, because we haven't gone through everything and read everything all together. So is that helpful?
Yeah, is there any timeline for, is it sections 3, 4, and 5 that are missing then?
Let me,
since 1, 2, and 6 are
so
up.
one of them is the section that basically we write while we're doing our deliberations, right? So that one gets written contemporaneously. Another one is, I'm sorry, I don't have my cheat sheet in front of me that has the different sections. Oh, here it is. Section 3 is basically just the criteria and the engineering criteria. So it's just a summary of what's in the matrix basically, and any other things that are getting captured. And section 4 is XCAP findings, things that we've learned. And section 5 is recommendations and rationale. And those may very well be something that kind of all gets written together, right? And so that's what the chapters are. So I think we laid out an outline based on kind of a high level, this is what we need to be sure the report has, but it may be that as we put everything together, we rethink that.
Yeah, I think we may actually have some of those criteria sitting on our side already, but definitely not all of them.
Great. And that's the benefit of us sharing drafts, because then people can say, oh, you know what, I already read this, it's over here, let's copy paste, and so we'll see.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Phil, and then I see Tony and then Larry.
Okay, so I'm actually excited about the fact we're finally going to start producing some outputs. I mean, we've been working at this long enough. So just a general comment for purpose. I don't think we've yet decided on the method of collaboration, but I suspect Google Docs would probably be very useful, because that means we could collaborate without meeting all at the same time.
We can't do that. So at the last
we
meeting, we
can't.
heard from the city attorney, or Philip informed us through the city attorney, that we cannot actually all participate in Google Docs. So in smaller groups, we can do those,
right,
but then we've got to make the sections public, which is part of the.
All right, then scratch that idea. Okay, bad idea,
Sure.
bad Philip. I just want to comment to Dave that as we find we have repetitive material, let's at least hope we're consistent.
Yeah.
Also, for chapter 2, I would suggest that at a minimum, we include the traffic count diagrams that Gary Black has produced, and maybe little crude circles showing turning movements through intersections. Those are my comments, except that I have a suspicion this will take longer than any of us imagine it will take, because based on my own, let's call it private sector experience. We need to just grasp that thorn bush by the hands with some gloves on.
Duly noted. Thank you, Phil.
What?
I said duly noted.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll regret for saying this, but I'm be happy to help with that process.
Great.
Now I regret I said that.
Thanks, Phil. All right, I see Tony and then Larry and then Dave.
So my issue is sort of similar with Phil's. It's getting cumbersome to collaborate. Not used to doing this in the private sector. We collaborate much more easily. But we'll have to plow through this, unfortunately. And on this findings issue that I think Phil is leading, right, Phil? You're leading that. So could you guys, Nadia, you and Larry, sort of give us an indication of what's a finding and what's a fact? Sort of some indication of what we're supposed to come up with.
So I think for me, and Larry, chime in if you've got different thoughts. A fact is whatever. You need 20 feet. I'm making numbers up, so please don't all jump on me, traffic people. You need 20 feet to make a left-hand turn or something. A finding might be that we've learned that one of the issues that happens at Churchill is that when the light changes, we have a bunch of cyclists that gather at a light waiting to cross and create a large group. And that has some bearing on the potential width of an underpass, just as an example. And so the finding might be is like, well, we've noticed that there's these unique things that happen that's not really listed in a traffic report, isn't really described in any other way, but it's something that we've learned is an issue, right? Another one might be if you put a light at Embarcadero, that might have a potential impact on the bike paths, and we don't really understand what that is, and so we're flagging that for a future group.
Yeah.
So anything that it needs like future help, or is something that we've learned but isn't necessarily captured in any of the documents, would be great. My biggest thing is not losing this institutional knowledge, understanding that this report may sit for a few months or years on a shelf. As much as we can throw in there that are things that we all intuitively now understand but didn't write in there, let's write them in.
Yeah. So I just want to say very briefly that if I extend that out a little bit, it sounds like we'd be documenting a lot of the engineering trade-offs or council criteria trade-offs that are being made and that are reflected in the designs. And that material may be duplicated, but it's a question of how many places do we want to make people go to get the complete picture. So this has the potential to get quite big if we don't manage it and define what's important enough to include and what is not important enough to include. Thank you.
Thanks. Tony, did you have anything else or? Okay. And Phil, if you could put your hand down too, that'd be great. Dave, that means you're, or actually Larry, you had your hand up. Yeah, go ahead. The virtual hand went down somehow. I don't know how.
Well, I wanted to follow up on Phil's comments and David's as well. Certainly the editing task should remove repetitions. For example, we're not going to have 6 different chapters saying that this is a committee that was created by the city council, one time at the start is enough of that. But I would propose that when I do some editing, that I would, before it comes back to the committee, I would send it to the 1 or 2 chief authors and say, here are the thoughts that I have on how we should revise that, and hopefully get the agreement on those changes, whatever they are, so that when we finally do bring back a proposed chapter to the full committee, we have 2 or 3 or 4 people who've already agreed to what's before the committee. And so I would hope that it would move faster than Phil is saying, though. I may be too optimistic on that.
And it may mean that weekly we've just got to be putting out as just informational items, draft chapters, again, because of the Brown Act, just so we can kind of keep resetting the who can view what. And it's just, it's unfortunate because it might create some confusion, but.
I also wanted to mention that as a courtesy to Pat, I think that we should offer her the opportunity to have her thoughts included as an exhibit, or at least know what we're doing with that section.
Yeah, I agree. She has a tremendous amount of experience in suicide prevention, and I want to make sure that the document I write either cuts and pastes or liberally paraphrases what she said, but we still might want to consider that. Yes.
Right, and at a minimum, we could absolutely include her original draft in the appendix, which in some ways represents her opinion, right? So, so yeah, Dave, and then In-Young.
Yeah, just quickly, actually, Larry's, I think, touched on it already, which is, I was curious about what we do from this point forward. And so, at least in chapter 2, I guess we've restarted the potential clock. If I want to retain ownership, I could actually work on it for definitely for another 2 or 3 weeks or so. So I'd want to keep cranking on it if I could. So can you describe a process maybe for us, for all of us who are working on stuff, to say, like, maybe we suggest you like you said, please produce an informational document if you can every Friday, and then it'll get posted for the next XCAP on the Wednesday, and something like that is how we might operate from this point forward.
Yes, I know you're up against as you've stated, you've got your kids going back to school soon, right? So that's going to make your time limited. And so I know you said like August. When do the kids go back in Palo Alto schools? August 16th?
17 is Monday. I think that's the day.
And so of course we don't have a meeting next week. So we don't meet again until the 12th, I believe that it is. So you'll actually have the packet will be out the week before, by that Thursday. So you're basically the Wednesday or Thursday of the week of the whatever that is. Sorry, bad with math and non-calendar. I can email you offline, but you'll have basically up until then. And sure, I mean, I'm sure at this point, if you want to keep writing and add to it, I think Larry and I have enough material to keep us busy for a while. So sure, take what you need for the next 10 days or so, and turn what you can in. I think that this is just going to be a work in progress, and we'll have to do what we can do. Larry, does that sound okay to you? Yeah, a thumbs up. Okay.
I'd love to hear any comments that you two have too, because we haven't heard from you two. I don't know how that affects the Brown Act. Maybe now that it's out in the public and we reset the
comments on the chapters that were provided. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, at least on my side, maybe for everything, but at least for mine.
Yeah, full disclosure, I think Pat Lau's chapter was the only one I had read previously. I did not get a chance to read what you turned in. I just sent it straight to the city. So my apologies. I'll try to send you something offline because the counter does get reset. But why don't you decide whether you want me to say something now, or you want to wait because you have X number of others that you want to work with until you turn in your draft.
Well, Carrie and In-Young were the other two previously, but I'm willing to definitely work on it. I haven't talked to them about whether they want to continue or not. So
okay. Well, you and I had some exchanges. You might want to talk to Larry. He should be we call it Brown Act buddy. So you might want Larry to be your Brown Act buddy on this. So
Larry?
Yeah.
Or you can tell me later.
Now, just one more quick point. I mean, I'm sorry for not covering this before. What is the method by which the public can provide comments on the published parts of the draft report?
Oh, well, they have our email address, and I'm sure we're going to get emails on it. So
okay, so that's the vehicle.
Yeah, we simply do not have the time to take time during public meetings to discuss the drafts. Like we're just not going to be able to. And so, in fact, unless it has to do with, we're just not going to be able to take public comment in that way. And it's the hardest thing about agendizing these things, right? It's because it's making it clear that we're not going to be able to do that.
Now, if let's say I get an email from somebody on something I've written, am I obligated to either copy the entire XCAP or copy the entire XCAP plus the public list, or am I obligated not to do any of that? And am I even obligated to reply to the person who sent me the comment?
So anybody sending feedback is asked to send it to the XCAP address, because that's the best way for all XCAPers to get it. They shouldn't send it to the one particular person. If you receive something and it's just to you, please forward it to the XCAP, and we'll make sure you put, careful with the Brown Act, don't reply all. But, sometimes when I get something, I make sure that it gets distributed to everybody. That's the best way to do that. You do not need to respond to individual emails from the public.
Okay, so let me summarize.
Keep you very busy.
Aside from the fact that everybody's drowning in email already, let me summarize. If I get an email on any topic relating to my chapter 1 or anything else I write, I should forward that to, let's say, the city for complete distribution.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Inyang, and then Keith.
Yeah, so I got, I have a similar, questions that David has and everybody has. So chapter 2, like I want to make sure everybody's in the same, timeline or whatever the deadline. So Dave wrote a chapter 2, and I was editing too for, review and visibility, but then we have to publish it on Friday. So I didn't have a chance to do very much work. Now public is reading this draft. They're going to send feedback to a certain date. I would assume not just an email, because if they're giving us feedback, I think we should respond to it, right? Because I don't want to have people spend time on the reading and then send feedback and ignore it, right? So if Nadia, if you could specify timeline, public could read this draft and give feedback on, next day or whatever, Dave work on it or I work on it or Carrie work on it. So can we decide it on this kind of process or timeline, because it's not clear to me.
And Young, I apologize. We were having some audio issues with you. So I think what you're asking is, could we present a timeline for both the feedback from the public for you and when your draft should be turned in so it makes it into the draft packet? Did I get that right? In Young, can you hear me? Okay. I'm getting signals that In Young can't hear, but it looks like you unmuted yourself. Okay. We'll come back to In Young. I see, Larry, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, in response to what In Young said and Phil as well, if a member of the public sends in some comments on something you've drafted, the procedure that Nadia outlined, that it should go back through Sarah or whoever's acting for us as the city administration, so it goes out to all members of the committee. But if you want to respond, Phil, to what that person has suggested, you're certainly free to do so. That's no Brown Act problem. You can talk to members of the public. You can talk to 1,000 members of the public. But the question is that In Young raised is, do you have an obligation to respond to that member of the public? And the answer is no, you don't. As a matter of courtesy, you want to, fine. If you think the person is just being way out there, you don't have to. So it's each committee member's individual choice as to how to respond to a member of the public.
Thanks, Larry. And I would say I'm looking at the calendar now so I can speak more coherently. because our next meeting would be on August 12th. So the packet, we need to have anything in that's going to be printed in the packet and released to XCAP by Thursday, August 6th. That gives Sarah enough time to be able to put it out into the agenda and make sure that it gets PDF'd and that sort of thing. So Dave, you've got about another week to write and get with your group and do whatever changes you want and then resubmit something. Does that help? Okay.
Just a quick question.
Yeah,
about that, since
yep.
you specifically said me.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Are there any Brownick issues with staying with Kari and Inyon?
Nope.
Okay. And I could still talk to Larry if he's going to be my Brownick buddy.
That would be your fourth. Yeah, that's your last. That would be your last buddy.
Okay.
On this go round, then it resets. I know it's confusing, but once we get into it, it'll get more comfortable. It's just awkward in the beginning.
So you'd also have to remove Nadia from permission for the document.
Yes, just take me off.
Okay. All right.
Yes, thank you for that, Carrie. Yep. Is Keith, I see your hand.
Yeah, Phil had an observation, which I think was correct, is that we've been working on this for a long time and we learned a lot and we thought a lot. And if we put this all on paper, it's going to be very, very time consuming for us to write, but also very time consuming for anyone to read and almost make it worthless. So I would encourage everyone to start each section with just a high level summary and get that as crisp and as short as possible, and then add detail after that. So if council or anyone else wants to read it, they read the first section of every chapter, they can go through and have a pretty good idea what's going on and not have to spend a day and a half or curl up in the weekend and do nothing but read the document. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think just to be clear, another way that we could handle this as a group is to have, it's not unusual to have a detailed report, but also have an executive summary. So we could also draft sort of a very high level, here's where we ended up, here's the short part, here's the short version, and then have the full report. So, you might want to think about as you're writing each section to err on the side of, well, here are all the things I really want to capture. And we can worry about the short version more towards the end when it becomes, once we've decided, when it becomes really clear what we really want the short version to say, right? I think that might be one way to think about it. So as you're writing, that can be in the back of your head. These are things I want in the executive synopsis, but then here's the meaty version. Yeah. And my tendency is for that is because, again, my background is I have spent my time reading the appendices and the footnotes in these kinds of reports. And honestly, that's where the good stuff lies. And so I wouldn't want you to think about cutting back so much that you're trying to make it easy for council members to read and you're dropping a lot of techie data. I'm comfortable that we'll probably figure out a way to do an executive summary that gets to the high level and is easy enough for council members to read. But then, someone who really wants to go deep is going to go into your chapter and get there. So
yeah,
that's
Nadia, I just want to say that I really like your idea about an executive summary, because that puts all the high level information on one or maybe 2 pages, which is probably all most people are going to look at, except for something that really interests them, with the appropriate cross references into the main document.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Larry, I see your hand.
That's from before, sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. Okay, anybody else? Questions about the chapters? Okay, and I think the way we have this, Philip, I thought, can you help me here with, are we doing public comment on this section? Because I think we agreed that we were not going to have comments on the specific chapters. We're going to ask people to send those in. So again, from anybody who's listening, if you've read the draft chapters that have been turned in, the very best way to give us any feedback is really to send us an email at xcap@cityofpaloalto.com, because it is very difficult for us to take oral communications and then try to incorporate that into reports. So what would be super useful is if you have a comment just kind of generally on the process or a suggestion about process stuff, that would be great. But any specific comments on the different chapters should really be sent via email. And I'm going to repeat that week after week. So by the end of this, you guys are going to be really sick of me saying that, because as we said, we're going to have to keep releasing draft versions of this. But I really just want to put it out there. The most help you can give us is sending stuff in writing, because that's how we're guaranteed to be able to read through all of those. So with that.
I'm sorry, Nadia, I just want to
clarify that a little bit. I think we do have to allow
Yes.
for if someone wanted to provide it via public comment, but I think that the chair's request is to receive those comments in writing if possible.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. So, we certainly take them in oral communications, but I really, as you guys know, we're just a bunch of residents who volunteered. And so please make this easier for us. Anything you can send us in writing is just that much easier. So with that, I will take it to public comment. It looks like we've got 2 speakers.
Yes, we have 2 speakers, and our first speaker is Roland, and our following speaker would be Susan. Roland, go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and speak.
Thank you. And Nadia, yes, I do want to talk about process, not specific chapters. With regards to the best way to address transparency when you're seeking input from the public, I would put it to you that 1 or more blogs may be actually very useful, because that basically eliminates the person-to-person dialogue between a member of the public and member of the SCAP or whatever. And now it's open to the general public. Everybody can see, what's out there and maybe think about it and provide more input. And it also gives, external viewers the opportunity to look over the other people's shoulders. And I'm thinking like, the council members who want to see what the temperature is of the residents, etc. So I just thought I'd put it out there as a suggestion for reaching out for public feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Our next speaker is Susan. Susan, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can continue to speak.
Hi. Yeah, I kind of had a sort of similar process idea. I'm not sure I completely understand Roland's, but his sounded good because it allows for a little bit of overview of who's doing what and what's being said. But I was wondering if there was any possibility of giving viewer only access to Google Doc representations of chapters when they're sort of finalized enough that you're going to look at them in a meeting before the meeting, and then and giving that access to the public. I don't know how you get our emails, but I'm sure that can be figured out. If we have the view access, it's possible to then make a copy of the document and insert comments and propose changes sort of kind of at the right points in the document in a way that could be very helpful in case we actually manage to come up with something that's of any use. And then share that, we would then share it with XCAP and you could do whatever you wanted to with it. It wouldn't change the underlying document at all. And it would just give a little bit easier access to the chapters. And then the one other thing, I don't know how much time I got now, but I had to say was about Pat Lau's section. I just really have to bring out in public the kind of the seeming bias in the document. I'm not understanding. I understand the general issues about safety that she's talking about, but it's not clear to me why she calls the viaduct this dangerous crossing. Doesn't really give a justification. If that's so bad, why is the hybrid not described the same way? Anyway, I just want to draw attention to some of those issues before you decide what to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. We have no more raised hands at the moment. That would conclude our public speakers.
Thank you. So I just wanted to point out in terms of the concern of people being able to see what other people are emailing in, the XCAP email address, what happens every week, you might have noticed that there's the agenda, and then we also have the summary of the letters that have been received by XCAP, and that's something that gets posted every week on the website. So if you send some feedback to the XCAP, then your feedback will get posted, will not just be distributed to all the XCAP members, but it's also going to be printed in that packet, so everybody can then read it. And if you try to have an offline conversation, let's say, for example, with Phil, and you sent Phil all of your thoughts on something, as we just discussed, Phil will be sending that to make sure all XCAP members get receive whatever was sent in. as will all XCAP members. And again, it will be put into that packet. So everyone will be able to see exactly what's happening. It's the same way city council works. You're seeing all of the things go to the entire council, and you'll be able to follow along. To the comment that was made about Google Docs, so we had a conversation with the legal department, and the problem is that everything has to be facilitated for even folks who don't necessarily have technology access. So the thing about Google Docs is that if you've got an internet access and you can go in there, yes, you can see the comments. But all these rules have been set up so that if you thought of this in the more retro old school way, if I show up at a council meeting in person, which we don't do in COVID, but in person, and I wanted to read what was happening, there would have to be a paper printed version of all of the comments that have been made in a Google Doc at a certain moment in time. And that becomes very cumbersome. And so for that reason and a bunch of other legal reasons that I'm sure someone from the city could give us a better discussion or description of, is why we can't use that method. And so why we're having to do this kind of broadcasting of stuff. It constitutes also a serial meeting, having these comments that are going continuously in the same document, because then ex-cappers could potentially be talking to each other in that, in order. So that's what happens. So the way we're getting around the serial meeting problem is we are broadcasting each week what is the latest draft that we have, and we've limited how many people can talk about it in each mini group, and that's what you're hearing us struggle with. So I hope that outlines for the public kind of why we can't do what seems like a really obvious thing. But I do appreciate the feedback. And Roland, I hear you that a blog would be easier, but the poor city is just drowning in trying to manage the one website we have. I'm not adding to their plate. So, but thanks for the thought. Okay, I think with that, if we have any staff updates, Ripon or Philip, do you guys have anything?
Actually, I did want to share that related to the question of the blog. We actually are looking at doing a blog or multiple blog posts related to the virtual town hall. So
great, but ex-cappers would not be on the blog responding, correct?
Yes, this would be a city.
Because we're busy writing.
That's right. It'd be a city blog related to the town hall, and we're working on developing that right now.
Great, Larry, I see you have a question.
Or I think you're still on mute.
No, I'm not. My favorite question, Bill, how are we doing on the town hall? What's the date?
Yeah, good question. The virtual town hall is coming together really well. We've seen kind of a draft version of what the virtual room looks like, which is really exciting. And a lot of the materials are on there. The date, I believe, is set for the 19th or around there, which really ties to the dates that we want to have it up for, and not having it start on a weekend or on a Monday when we have a council meeting, because we plan to also release a couple different reasons. Number one, we want to make sure that we're available and ready in case there's any technical issues as it kicks off. And also we want to have a kind of a tutorial video that releases at the start of the thing that will help people to orient to the virtual town hall environment. So that's our current plan, and work is proceeding very well. And our plan is to keep it open through Labor Day to give people time to comment on it.
Okay, thank you.
Tony, I see your hand up.
Yes. So my question is, some of these solutions that AECOM have come up with are infringe on the northern section of this alignment. And I'm wondering what the status is of that alignment. I know I used to ask these questions 6 months ago, and Ed asked me to stop because Palo Alto Avenue will be left open. But it does have some geometric impacts on how that section dovetails into Embarcadero and the AECOM solutions. So I'm wondering what that timeline is, and how do we dovetail it if we don't know what that solution is?
Sorry, so are you asking about the timeline for the Palo Alto crossing?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Palo Alto crossing that ends up at Embarcadero, right? The alignment we're going to take for granted, fix that alignment.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't really have an update for you on that. I think that the plan was that it would follow this process, which we're not done with yet, obviously. But it also ties into something else, which is related to the downtown plan. And I'm not really sure of the timeline for that at this point. So sorry, I can't give you more information than that. Believe you're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Can we unlink just the alignment part of it so that it informs us? Or is it has to be tied to the downtown plan?
Currently, we're not planning to unlink any of them, or we're planning to keep them separate at this point. And there are quite a few reasons for that.
Tony, I would say for your purposes, because I know you guys are looking at engineering stuff, you could consider that an opportunity for a place where you might want to give your thoughts on, if you did this, then this happens, or if, whatever you is the reason why you think there's linkages, you'd have an opportunity in this report to say, hey, these are the following links. And when you have this conversation, this is how this impacts this or doesn't, or might. That might be.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, anything else from staff that we need to know? Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know if this has come up at all, but just want to mention that last night the San Francisco Board of Supervisors unanimously approved one of the 7 boards that gets to determine to move forward with putting a ballot measure for Caltrain. Although it's got some potentially difficult things that they've added to their amended in the resolution related to governance issues, which there's some concern about whether they conform to the original Senate bill that authorized this ballot measure. But that said, it's going to be progressing pretty quickly and going through the other boards coming up in the next couple of weeks through August 6th, and needs to be determined. I think the last 3 boards that determine this are meeting on August 6th to determine that, including the Santa Clara Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. I think to add to that, I believe it's on the City Council agenda for August 3rd, Monday. And it's also both on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors and the VTA Board of Supervisors meeting for August 6th. And the deadline is August 7th, which is the following day. So basically, if you're interested in Caltrain issues, you should go read up on those. And if you'd like to send your thoughts in, now would be a good time to do so.
Yeah, and our item for the board is late packet, obviously, due to this late breaking news. For the City Council, it will be posted tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that we as XCAP will continue with our process sort of no matter what's happening with Caltrain, because just because a tax measure may or may not make it on the ballot does not change the fact that Caltrain, will likely still operate at some point in the future, and we will still have this issue. So to the folks who think, well, we don't know what's happening, and so you should just stop. I would just say, as volunteers who've been doing this for a really long time, we'd like to write a report to tell you what we've done. Whether or not you do something with it afterwards is completely up to you, but give us a chance to write this report at this point, because otherwise we've been doing this for a long time and have nothing to show for it. So we appreciate everyone's patience with that.
I have one final quick staff update before it looks like Ripon might have one as well. Just wanted to share that tonight we've got several new Office of Transportation members who've been helping out with the meeting. So I want to thank them. I'm even in a new role tonight. As you see, I don't have my name. So with that, I want to thank them, and I'll turn it over to Ripon.
I was just going to add SFMTA has that item also scheduled for their board hearing on the July 31st meeting.
Great, thank you. Yep, and big thanks to Joanna and Raphael and Elizabeth who've been helping us behind the scenes. So thanks. Okay, and with that, we are adjourned. So thank you, everybody. Bye.